What is up, weirdos? You've got your weird host, Jeremy Grinsteiner of the Weird and Strong podcast, back with you one more time for a very special episode. This episode came out of conversation with another coach that I had around this idea of always doing more, following the hustle culture. And we turned this into a amazing and powerful coaches roundtable between myself, Gunnar Regan, and Sara Mozingo. These two hadn't talked before this roundtable, so this was their introduction to each other, and I loved how much in common that all three of us had as coaches, and the experiences that we all have as chasing that need to always do more. What does that hustle porn or hustle culture look like? So I'm very excited for you to hear this episode and this conversation between two other amazing coaches. So with that, let's get weird, folks. Welcome back, everybody, to a very special episode of the Weird and Strong podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Grinsteiner. Today, we have our first podcast that is more of a roundtable with a couple of other coaches that I know and respect really well. We had a conversation that led into this, or we had multiple conversations that led into the discussion that you'll be hearing today. And it's going to be all about hustle culture. So before we get into that, I'm going to pass things over to Sara to give a little introduction about herself.
Hey, everybody. Sara Mozingo. I am an online coach. My company is called YourDoingGreat.co. And I help people focus on their inner child, their inner healing, and also in the fitness world. So, yeah, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. We'll kick it over to Gunnar.
Hello, my name is Gunnar Regan. I own a online business as well, coaching company called Animist Coach. My intention with all the work I do is to help people live calm confidence, whatever way that shows up for them. So, I help athletes, I help non-athletes, depending on what you identify with, get to a place where you can succeed in anything you want to do.
Thank you both so much for being here. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while and the names and the voices sound a little familiar, it's because they've both been past guests. So it's really fun to see them both here together in the same space as well. So to our topic at hand, we're talking about hustle culture. There's a prevalence online, especially through our social media, through certain media figures, that what we need is to just work harder, to put the nose to the grindstone, wake up at 3 a.m, make sure that you're eating and taking these supplements, getting in 3 workouts, doing all these things, and having all of that pressure from the just work harder. I'm going to open this up to both of you. What's been your experience with this type of message, or have you fallen into the trap of this type of messaging before?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I lived that life for a little while, especially when I was in the brick and mortar space. And there's the trap of, people talk about working harder, but they rarely talk about what you should be working on. So I do think there is some merit to, having the routine, even though that's shocking probably for Jeremy to hear, because I was not a routine person in our world. And having the outline of what should you be working hard on, because working hard for the sake of working hard, I was really good at it. And I just spun in circles, and it was like a hamster wheel of just great, I'm up, I'm doing the thing, but I don't actually do the thing that moves the needle. And that's what I see a lot when people come to me. I work a lot with endurance people. And so more is more in their world. And, it's, I can do another long run this week. I can add this in, I can add that in. And there's no look back at what's happening, right? There's no looking back at, when I add in another long run, my leg hurts. It's it's a mystery, it's like this, it's shocking to them. And so I myself have fallen into the trap. And I work with a lot of people who are in the endurance space, and that's kind of the mantra of endurance, right? Is do more. So, yeah.
I resonate with that. And for me, my background being team sports and then getting into CrossFit and competing for the better part of a decade. And when you make it to those higher levels of performance, there's this constant a cloud that hangs over the top performers. It's like, you're not anything if you're not doing this, or you're not, again, taking this supplement. Like, you got to do zone 2. That's a big thing right now. It's like, if you're not doing zone 2 hour, stationary bike a week, are you even training? It's like, no, I took a walk. I enjoyed myself today. I met some friends, and guess what? My cortisol is way lower. But again, that's not necessarily what we're going to talk about today. So, my experience is definitely some nuance around, like, all right, what sport is it specifically? Who am I coaching in that sense too? One big thing I took notes on beforehand was the music and the messaging that we bring into the spaces that we train. Those are hand in hand with hustle culture for sure.
So, having been people who have fallen into this messaging, into the trap of just work harder, what was it that drew you to this type of message, or why buy into it? Why fall into this trap?
Are you asking why try that again? Why fall into the more trap? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Like, how did you find yourself there? Like, what led you to that type of a mindset?
For me, it was who I was surrounded with. So like Gunnar was speaking, the CrossFit culture for me was, man, if you're not, adding in another workout, if you're not hitting this again, if you're not in there 2 to 3, 4 hours a day, then, what's the point? And so, and I think like part of that is also my background in team sport. It's 2 practices a day. Then you've got, and that happened a lot for me through college athletics. Like, high school wasn't that bad. They had to cut you off. College was kind of a free for all. So it was, the 2 practices a day, the 20 hours of weightlifting, the one-on-ones, then you've got study hall, and oh, by the way, you got a good class. So that was where that kind of more is better approach really stuck for me. Then a short stint in corporate America, again, more is more, right? More output. More output gets you a promotion. So it really started for me, it really hit in college athletics. And then it was perpetuated through what I chose to surround myself with after that. And then getting into kind of the CrossFit culture. I truly, really do love CrossFit, and I don't want to like bash that. I think there's a better way. And I think what CrossFit did for the fitness community is outstanding. What CrossFit did to get people from couch to, pull up is unmatched, in my opinion, as far as amount of people. So I think there are some genuine, awesome parts of that. And if we could get back to what it was originally intended to be, I think it would be really, really cool. So yeah, that's kind of my path into more. Yeah.
Yeah, I similar piece there. So I also played a college sport, and before that, I came from a very successful, very regimented, driven environment in high school, and again, like probably the most successful team in the state at the time. And going into college, I was playing Division III, and I had the routine down. I think we touched on that earlier. Like, all right, I'm already in the routine of training, being really regimented, eating with intention, sleeping more than my teammates, whatever it was. And uniquely, like I came into college hockey as the only 18-year-old on my team, and everyone else was 21. So I was in Milwaukee, big drinking culture there. And I took it upon myself to go, well, if they're going to go out to drink and party and whatever, I'm going to train all of that time, because that's going to make me better. But in that time, it put me in a place where I was more susceptible to injury, like separating shoulders because I was too low body fat, or like trying to grind in that direction, like more training to be better on the ice, but also like, I'm going to be the best one in the weight room. I'm going to be the fittest, like having that mindset of, okay, it's got to be the top or it's not worthy. that is now a story that I'm, unraveling for myself in real time. But then transferring into CrossFit, I also agree. CrossFit has completely opened my eyes to the possibilities of life. However, I see from a lot of my friends and peers, there's no life if you're trying to compete and make CrossFit something that it was not intended for when it was created, right? It's a fitness routine. When it became a sport, even for people who are not in a place to compete at the highest level, it's very dangerous. And I could add more to that. However, for me, again, like the more do more all the time was fueled by, I had my own view of myself that was not meeting expectations that I set for myself. But I also placed a lot of emphasis on what other people thought of me. And all right, if I'm going to be this, world champion, I had that in my mind, other people are going to think of me at that as well. So I have to do everything that matches that definition.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you both for sharing your various journeys on that. And then, through all of this, for either of you, what was the big moment that started to make that shift for you? Or what was the thing that set you on the path away from this always more, this always hustle, this always grind mentality that is so pervasive?
I'm gonna thank Gunnar for what he just brought up, because that was, I think he nailed what put us both on the path. I think our stories are so similar, even though this is our first meeting. Is that road of not enoughness, right? And the road of like, I can also remember as a female losing my period, getting down to that low body fat percentage, looking in the mirror, if I scroll back through my phone I'm probably older than both of you, so scroll back, way back. There's probably enough bathroom selfies in there to like see what my stomach looked like, see what my abs look like, see what my arms look like. Like I'm almost 6 feet, so the illusion of a six pack is rare, and did I not try for it? So that no matter how good I looked, there was always something missing, and so in my mind that meant I had to do more. And so that's the transition out of more is when I started to like me. And I won't even go with love me. I'm just going to go with like me, because that's where it started. Was like, oh, I've been through 6 knee surgeries. I've been through, doing the CrossFit Open and then waking up and not being able to walk, and like, oh, it's fine. I'll just hide that from everyone I'm coaching. They don't need to know that that's a reality. So I'll figure out a way to pretend like that's not real, so that people see me as this high level coach and this high level athlete. And so Gunnar, thank you for sharing that, because that was really like an aha moment for me, is when it was like, what are you doing to you? And I can remember very vividly, like my knee surgery started in college, and I can remember very vividly my coach saying, you should just coach and stop playing. You're not going to be able to walk when you're 30. And I was like, that's cute. I'm going to keep going, because that's what I do. But I can very vividly remember who would I be? Who would I be if I stopped pursuing this thing? And the answer to that was scarier than to keep going and seeing what happens to my body. Yeah.
That again resonates really, really close to home. I don't know if there's a specific instance where it was like, you need to stop going in this direction. Because I still really do love training hard. And that's, to put the caveat in that, it's not training more. Like I went from moving to Nashville, training with the top athletes in CrossFit for the first 8 months of the year, where I was in the gym 6 to 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, just training. And wanted, it just didn't allow for me to experience life outside. And I've, as a mindset coach, someone who can show up and create a lot of space for people, I was hyper aware of everyone around me being miserable. And that was also the first time I've really been in a training camp environment with CrossFit. And so, I had my own picture in my head beforehand, training by myself, putting in the hours. We love rowing intervals. We love squatting 10 sets for an hour, whatever it takes. And that's very meditative in that sense. However, when it's so repetitive and it's for just a single weekend in a year, I started to realize oh, wow. I lived in Nashville. People are always asking me oh, how do you like it? And I was I could tell you about all four walls of this gym that don't have windows. This isn't it. And, it was many steps along the way, but getting around that environment of, okay, everyone here is doing more and more and more and being fitter and harder and tougher for what? And yeah, I'm super grateful for that experience because I can now relate to that. I can also relate to making that shift. And yeah, if I'm training 5 hours a week, coming down from 45 hours a week, that's a huge shift. My fitness hasn't really gone anywhere. It would take me maybe 2 weeks of really intense focus to get back. And I think there's a cool caveat there. It's we've all three of us pushed really far at one time, but you don't have to push really far all the time to make it, right? You can get there, rest, recover, take in the scenery, metaphorically there, but use your fitness, use your strengths, use your lessons to do so much more.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to jump into this because, sorry, Jeremy.
Okay.
I think that's such a fun place to be. What you just described is such a fun place to be because in my own experience, I'm very similar to that. Training is way down. I'm probably only at 4 days a week. I was not at the level you were at all, but Gunnar, I got asked to do a 48-mile ride in Whitefish, Montana. And gravel ride, 4,800 feet of elevation. I am from Pancake Flat. And you have that, one, we all have that competitive thing that's sure, sounds great, because it's your friends, you're yeah. And you also know in your heart of hearts that you can do it. It's never a question. Is it going to be world record pace? No. Am I going to win against people that are trained at, 5,000, 6,000 feet of elevation and I haven't been there all year? No. And you're a week or two of training away from being yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm not going to be destroyed. I'm not going to be it's not something where I'm not going to walk for 3 weeks. And it's such a fun place to be in because you can then pivot anywhere, right? You could pivot to CrossFit comp in 2 weeks with your friends to just have fun. You could pivot to endurance. You could pivot to probably a bodybuilding show if you wanted to. Everything is just right. You're at that pivot point and it's such a cool place to be. Yeah.
Exactly. And a big thing for me is I was competing up until the end of 2022 and I really wavered. And that's kind of where I met Jeremy is, I wasn't sure what I was going to do this year. And I got to a place of, well, I want to experience all of this and I don't want to be injured. I don't want to be chronically underslept and underfed because my exertion level is so massive. But how close can I keep, those 90% of lifetime bests and train, 4 or 5 hours a week? All that work that we've done doesn't go away, which is the best part. If I want to refine my skill on running or biking and to go do a ride like that, yeah, absolutely. It's not going to take that much. Which might be a perfect segue, Jeremy. The hustle culture is no, it's going to take the hardest, deepest focus. You have to throw away your phone so you don't talk to anyone and go into
Yep.
a cave type thing.
Yeah, that's an awesome segue. Thank you, Gunnar. Is Sarah, you and I have talked about this before of many times of, people saying it's going to be hard or it has to be hard. I was like, oh, what if it's easy? What if it's fun? What if you enjoy it? Simply asking yourself that question can shift that mindset drastically. And playing into that too, we've talked a lot about the physical aspects of this, of athletics and training. Let's even pull this into the just general day-to-day working, having a focus on building a business or working on your career, because that's, for many people, much more realistic than, let's say, training for high-level athletics. And both of you have seen me in various states of I'm a person that can work all of the hours all of the time. And that's a gear I know real well. It's a pattern I know real well. Have either of you noticed a difference for yourselves in that mentality of this hustling, this grinding, from your athletic days to your professional days? Or does it feel very similar?
For me, the shift has been very linear. So I would say the workout started first. So like the decrease in time spent lifting, playing, doing that decreased a little bit by choice. As far as the something that really clicked with me is podcast book something was that you could get addicted to the sensation of overwork. And when I started to unravel that, when I started to realize that like you can get addicted to a feeling, that was something that was newer to me, in realizing that, oh, I can actually get addicted to a negative feeling. That seems so like counterintuitive to the way we're built. And so starting to really look at that story, starting to really look at what pattern that was. For me, joy was a fleeting thing. And so I was like, okay, if I can get addicted to overwhelm, stress, you name it, whatever it is over there, even probably bouts of depression, living in the lack of sunshine, cold place that we live, can I get addicted to the opposite? And so looking at the work of the people that do what, in my opinion, great things. So like your Tony Robbins, your Oprahs, your people like that, looking at how they set up their day. If I can spend 5 minutes in the morning transitioning whatever that feeling is to joy, right? Like whether that's just start laughing in the mirror, whether that's, Peter Pan, think a happy thought, like whatever that is, can I transition that to joy? That's been the one tool that has really broken that cycle for me. So if I can sit in the morning, and I do this before I even get out of bed, it's like alarm, I'm a snoozer 3 times, boom, 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 and I'm out of bed. And in that snoozes party that I'm having, I really take the in-betweens to find the joy, find that calm place in my body, actually be in my body. I am really good at leaving my body. So coming back in, getting grounded, and then focusing on like the happy thought. As cheesy as that sounds, it's so effective. And it's one of the simplest things that has greatly altered the outlook of my life. Yeah.
Ooh, there's a lot to follow there. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, the addiction to a feeling. Oof. As soon as you said that resonates. It resonates with my own experience, and then resonates with a lot of people I've coached. I see, just to use CrossFit as the example, I see CrossFit as a replacement addiction for a lot of people. Right? You gotta suffer, you gotta breathe fire, you gotta, whatever it is so intoxicating that people do it for a decade now for most people, or a decade and a half. And it doesn't lead to greater every time. It definitely breaks you down, right? Too much of that suffer feeling is huge. And again, going off of Jeremy and I were talking 2 weeks ago now. We were talking a lot on the messaging that we put into our space or allow into our space. And we were jokingly mocking David Goggins, which he's just a character. He's a larger than life character that shows up in our Instagram feeds when we're least expecting it. And then we get this jolt of that feeling. You're like, oh crap, I gotta get out of bed. And it's like, well, I'm not in bed. Like I'm doing work. I'm somewhere else, and I'm being, productive to what makes me feel joy, what brings me happiness. And I wrote down some quotes from him, and he has this huge thing about suffering, right? Like he's an addiction, walking addiction to suffering. And Sarah, I love that idea. Like, all right, can I just acknowledge that that's somewhere that I've been, or that's something that comes up, and then go, well, let's see what joy feels like, and sit with that. So, one of the quotes that I wrote down in prep for this was, it's like, the only way forward is to be harder. It's like, statues don't move very far.
That's awesome.
Right? Like pieces of granite are stationary. And it's like, how flowing can I be? How expressive can I be? How much can I absorb? Like, being soft, I think, is really important to absorb things. Like, I'm malleable. I'm flexible. I can get into a bike race. I could go sit for 10 hours and work really hard, because I know there's fluctuations. It doesn't always have to be one thing forever.
Yeah. And it's like looking at the contrast of things as well. Of, we're talking about the big ideas around move, go. And when it's only forward, or it's only push, where does the pull come in? Where does that balance? If we get into the concepts of all things come in cycles, and vibrations and things like that, we have peaks and valleys. Even if we play it back into something like exercise science, can you run a program that is continually building every single week, always up? No, you have to have some peaks and valleys in there. And so finding those spaces for yourself becomes very important, to be able to have those backing off times, up and down, ebb and flow. Just like you were talking about, Gunnar, of being in a flow between those areas. You're going to find that peak at the top, and then you're going to come down to the bottom, back and up. And talking about this addiction to addiction to overwork. When we look at even the messaging or how people talk about their time in whatever athletics, it could be CrossFit, it could be hockey, basketball, weightlifting, endurance running, biking, all of these things, and also in the corporate or job space or career space. How often do you guys hear people talk about things like, oh, that workout destroyed me, or oh, that was the hardest thing ever, as like a badge of honor? And looking at that, how much do you think that plays into that addictive feeling?
Yeah, I mean, language is huge, right? Like, language is how we view ourselves, how we view the world around us. I recognize both of you are some enlisted ninjas, and can ball out on some wordplay there. So yeah, it's like, if you make it a rule for yourself that the workout doesn't count if it does not hurt, or to flip that into more of an affirmation, like, it only counts when I'm suffering. It's like, no, it doesn't. Like, one of my recent experiments for myself in training is, how aggressive can I get for 10 seconds? And then how quickly can I come back to as if I never did it? And being able to go from 100 to 0 is way different than going from 65 back to 50. If we're always in that sort of peaked place, we don't understand how to relax, then that addiction is just like, my body is just oscillating so closely that I don't understand what it actually means to give my full effort. So, like for me, I've set some goals recently that I want to move towards in the next 2 months. I'm only allotting myself 3 to 5 hours a week to pursue them. But I now know from all the experience, like I can get there because of the language I have around it. Like, okay, if I give 100% in that 20-minute window that I'm going to train, how can I go to 0, let my body recover and get the most from that? Where a lot of the language, and coming back to the question, like a lot of the language in sports and CrossFit and whatever is like, again, you have to suffer, and you have to suffer all the time. It's like, yeah, but what about the gymnastic element? What about the flexibility element? Like you physiologically cannot express that if you're tense. You will not grow. You will not expand your abilities if you are constantly in that, middle range of, for thinking more physiological again, like tetanus versus tone. Like if I'm always hitting tetanus, then I'm jacked up all the time. My words are reciprocating that to everything I see. It's a recipe for disaster eventually, right? Like I'll on my point there. But yeah, the words are dangerous if you're unaware of them.
And it's also something that you said of like, oh, the workout doesn't count if I didn't suffer. I was like, oh, like just think of the hilarity of that statement. It's like, all right, body, forget everything that we just did. Like that wasn't a stimulus, like sweep it under the rug, ignore it. Like that's not true. That can't happen. You still did the work. Is it going to be the maximal or the optimized version of what you wanted? Maybe not. And you also still did the work.
I want to take this and I want to run with this a slightly different way because I love everything that's happening. So David Goggins, it was really interesting. I was listening to a podcast with Jocko and Huberman, and Jocko talks about how he only works out 4 minutes a day sometimes. And I feel like people's minds would explode if they actually knew his workout routine. But to take this for a more outside the gym perspective. So if we talk about everything has to be suffering, so that means that everything in life has to be suffering, right? And then we flip the duality. So this was a huge aha moment for me that I had about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. So learning about the duality, learning about peaks and valleys, you also have that on the emotional spectrum, right? So if I'm sitting in meh to yuck most of the time, right? I don't like my job. I don't like where I'm going. My friend group is my friend group. Like I'm just in that meh place. What Gunnar said about going from 100 to 0, it actually reminded me of dog training, which side story, but you can't stay at 100, right? Equally, you can't always stay at 0. Like, so learning how to ride that entire spectrum. So we talked about like, I wake up in the morning and I try to get myself to joy, which is, I'd say like 70 on the plus side, right? So that when things in my life happen and I dip to 30, I know I can come back to 70 easily. I also know I can hit 100. I can't stay there, right? Like 100, I think of when you come out of a retreat or you come out of some beautifully expansive experience, right? When you come out of that, there's always a contraction, right? You've moved your edge to what you can experience, but it'd be like saying, hey, I'm going to keep a mushroom high the whole time. Like that's just unrealistic, right? Like that amount of dopamine is just never a good thing for anybody. And so as we transition this to life in our work world, the goal isn't to like be in joy forever and have that fake positivity. The goal is to be regulated, like what Gunnar's saying, like going from parasympathetic to sympathetic. How fast can you transition them? How fast can you be at work? And let's say you're working a 9 to 5 and it is what it is. Like, that's what you love. You're in your zone. You like what you do, and you're getting the ping of the meeting. You're getting the boss that's like, hey, I thought you had that, and you forgot, and you get that sensation that you're like, ugh, and you tighten and you flex. How quickly can you get yourself back to 0 or to 30 on the other side? And that's, I think, the piece that people miss so much, especially in the fitness space, is like, that's really what you're doing, right? Yes, you're growing muscles, you're growing stamina, you're growing all of the technical terms, and you're learning how to take yourself from 0 to 100. And this is one of my favorite things, and Jeremy's favorite sport is weightlifting. Like, I coached an athlete, and I did no programming. Everybody thought I did all this programming and all this stuff. No, I literally taught him how to go from 0 to 10 and back down. And in doing that, in adding it, like, one of my favorite things to coach people is when they step up to a workout, if you can crack a smile, you feel less pain, right? So if you can have that, and this is something I learned at a very young age, playing basketball for hours and hours and hours. If I could crack that smile and get into that friendly competitive space, not the negative competitive space, but like, if Gunnar and I were about to throw down on a workout, and be like, yeah, I see you, right? Like, that space. Right? When you can get yourself to that space in any endeavor that you do, you feel pain less, right? And so you may be, quote unquote, suffering, and you don't realize it because you've now switched it to something fun and enjoyable. And I think that's the unfortunate message of the suffer culture, is the work hard culture, is we miss that piece. Like, yes, you have to meet an edge for growth. Like, call it what you want to call it. You have to need an edge for growth. Like, is there a place for suffering? I think so. And I believe that we can transition that with the language and in the approach that we take, right? Like, Gunnar's going to go in, and for those 20 minutes, he may not be having the best day of his life every single time he walks into that gym, right? It's almost 70-30 on the plus side, right? We all wake up and we're tired and we're sore and we're stiff and we're all of these things. And if you can transition that to like, all right, I see you, let's go. That experience is going to trump every other experience. And I think that that's the missing piece that we miss in the hustle culture. Like, I can remember almost to the day that Gary Vee stopped saying, wake up at 2 a.m. and do the things, right? He has drastically transitioned his message. A lot of the top influencers are starting to change that message. But what they're not mentioning is there still has to be growth, right? And so how do we transition what growth can feel like? And I think that's the biggest gift that we could give to the world is, there's going to be that edge, and you're just meeting an edge. And it can be that easy.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I notice in these conversations, or in the commentary, or even just watching, as like the Gary V's and the Jockos, like, people start to evolve in this space. There's a lot of nuance in this. And what I find that draws people to this type of message, or draws people into this type of mentality, is impatience. Again, it comes back to something that Gunnar brought up, Sara, that you reinforced, is this feeling of not enoughness. I'm not enough right now. I'm not where I want to be. I haven't achieved X, Y, or Z. And because of that, I'm going to look at the way that can get me there in the shortest amount of time possible. So I'm going to find whoever can drive me to, or whatever mindset or whatever methodology, whatever thing I can buy into that can push me to where I want to be as fast as I possibly can. I know for myself, when I've gone into that type of a space, or in that type of mindset, many times it takes me twice as long, or it takes me longer to get there than if I had taken a slower process, or done exactly like what Sara's talking about of, all right, where can I find enough of an edge to move me forward? Do I need to try to boil the entire ocean in one afternoon? Or can I start one small section at a time? Not that I want to boil the ocean. Like, it's a whole other thing. Eat the horse, eat the whale, whatever metaphor you want to use for that. It's like, can I start to get enough that makes it uncomfortable to find that edge, find that growth, and then come back from it? Again, to Gunnar's point of the go to 100, come back down as quickly as you can. In that, either of you have any follow-ups for any of that, or any ideas of like things that you've seen or with others that you've worked with or yourselves of why start to adopt this? Why start to gravitate towards this type of a message?
I'm going to add in a little bit. And I think that for me, this started with acceptance. And this was the hardest thing for me to learn I'm not very good with remembering who says quotes, but all of suffering is not accepting reality. So most of the suffering in the world is because we don't accept reality. Mm-hmm. And when we can accept reality, so when we can accept, that this is where my fitness is, or when we can accept that I am in a job that I don't love, or I'm actually in a job that I love, right? Like, it goes both ways. It doesn't always have to be negative. But when we can look out and accept reality and also accept the fact that we want more, it makes it a little bit easier to make that transition, because we can say, like, okay, I am here. And that's a really hard thing to look at, is to take true stock of where you are right now. Mm-hmm. And also know that you want more. So how can I be at peace and be in this spot, this dot, and find that I'm okay. Right. And that's, I think, where everything starts, as hard as that is the, be present, be in the present moment. But really taking stock of where you are, and whether that's, stealing this from Anat Perry, the taking yourself on a finance date, right? Sit down with every bank account that you have, every credit card statement you have, everything, and plan out a 3 hours, like you are going on a date with all of these statements, right? And check through them and see where you are. Take stock of your relationship, right? Sit down with your person, or maybe you start with your journal, and where am I? Where am I in this? Let's take our workout logs. Where am I in this? Right. And if we can start there, and all of these things used to bring terror up my spine. So I understand how terrifying some of these things can be, because the thing, we spoke about in Lifted Ninjas, but that's all about personal responsibility. Right. And that is a very challenging place, especially I find in our culture, because it's always somebody else, something else, somewhere else, something outside of ourselves. And now you're asking me to bring that back to me, and there is nowhere else but me. And that can be frightening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. To quote a hip hop song, you got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, yeah, if anyone listening to this, go back and just re-listen to what Sarah just said. Like that's exactly it. Like, accept, understand where you are, get clear on that. Personally, I don't track my workouts at all. Like, it's so intuitive to me to know exactly what I lifted, where I was, the warm-up sets, like all of that stuff is just ingrained. Like, I embody that anytime I go in the gym. Like, okay, this is how I warm up. It's all very routine. However, the other things, the life things, are where it's most apt for me right now. Like, can I go to a specific environment with a specific intention to understand where I am and then accept it? So where I am physically right now as we're recording, I do my coaching here, and I do, Zoom calls, podcast recordings. Like, this is the spot. I know for a fact I do not work well here looking at finances. So yeah, it's a understanding who I am, what works, and then going out and changing the environment. And that could be the piece too is like going back into the suffering discussion. I I don't follow a particular religion or anything like that, but I find a lot of value in Buddhist teachings around the four-way path, or it's four noble truths and then the eightfold path. And the first one is suffering is a part of life. That's a truth. Second one is we are the reason for our suffering. And then the third one is you have the opportunity to change that. And then the fourth step being the eightfold path. Like these are the ways to get past suffering or overcome, or if you want to change the wording there, let go. I don't need this suffering. I don't need to hold on to it all the time. Yet understanding if I'm worried about finances, do I know where I am with finances? Or am I just, going on Instagram and being told, you need to work 80 hours this week so you can get this Lamborghini and like all this stuff. And it yells at you every week. But that's someone else. That's someone else's message that's trying to invoke some of that fear, some of that suffering response. Like, oh, I'm not where I want to be. Pause, breathe, go sit down, do the work. I'm just reiterating everything Sara said. So thank you for that. Crushed it. But yeah, it's exactly that. Just understanding where you are. And I realize that's a big strength of mine as a coach is I can slow things down for people, help them look at what they're saying, help them understand their words. I may be working with a college level athlete. A lot of our conversations have nothing to do with being on the field. A lot of the conversations are, how do you feel about getting your homework done this week? Where's your mind? How do you feel about the relationship with your parents? Right? Can we get the understanding and then accept where we are so we can make change?
Yeah. First of all, I want to give some major acknowledgement to both of you as coaches, because right to what you said, Gunnar, about messaging is like that can be as coaches, that can be a very predatory space for people. If I'm going to poke at every insecurity that you have to get you to buy what I have. And to be coaches that are coming at this from a point of, hey, let's like look at where you are and let's take stock and help you, guide you to take ownership for yourself and where you are. And now I'm going to help you discover what that path forward looks like. Just want to give that acknowledgement as two amazing coaches that are in the space and that are doing the things that are maybe not as, I don't know, like sexy is the word that comes to my head. It's not necessarily actually sexy, but like the things that are less flashy, or is not as like buzzworthy or buzzword packed. And in that, we've been discussing many deep areas of what this looks like and how this affects people, how it's affected us personally, how it's affected people that we work with. What types of suggestions do either of you have? If somebody's coming across this type of messaging, social medias are big funnel for this, or this big megaphone that's shouting at us all the time with this type of message. And somebody's starting to come from that place of lack or come from that place of not feeling enough, that they're being driven towards this hustle culture, this grinding, and they start to find themselves being pulled in and start to really take on some of that messaging. Any suggestions that either of you have for ways to find yourself out of it?
I think one of the first things is take a week. For me, this is just what's popping in my head right now. Just take a week and see how it serves you. See how far you've moved the needle. Let's say you're You're waking up on Monday morning and you're like, I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hit it totally hard. And then by Friday afternoon, take a deep breath and see where you are. You know, I think is to go into the hippie weird, is it serving you? You know, is it serving you at all? And start to get really honest with yourself. If you're hitting the hustle culture in the fitness space, where is your body? You know, are you nursing an injury every 3 weeks? Are you, and it's okay to be real about that. Like, that's something that I got really good at hiding. And it's okay to be real about, man, I am just hurt a lot. Right. And it doesn't have to be these big blowout injuries. It's like, man, my knee doesn't feel good today, or like overhead feels like death, or, you know, whatever that is. If you're not in the fitness space and you're in the business space and you're grinding, the biggest thing that I've ever learned, and I fought learning for the longest time, is know your numbers and look at them. You know, is that serving you? Are you in the place where, yep, you just need to do the numbers to get yourself rolling? Do you have an end date, right? Like, is there hey, I'm going to send out, you know, I think the Hermosi just landed not that long ago, right? Am I going to send out 100 cold DMs every day for the next 3 months and see where I am? Or am I going to did I do it for a week and I'm exhausted, I can't sleep, I'm stressed? I start to take note of those things. So I think my advice is to do it for a week and let's see where you're at, right? If you're in it, track this week and notice, like, am I sleeping? Am I eating? Am I spending the quality time with the people I want to spend quality time with? Is there an agreement in there somewhere with what that looks like? Is there communication? Yeah, start to look at those things.
Just went into a little self-reflection there. Thank you. My advice, I think, fits right in with what you're going at. What you're talking about, Sarah, is take a breath. And a lot of what I have taught my clients and a lot of what I work on myself, especially in the context of that training session, right? If I can go to 100 and come back down to 0, the only thing I'm really paying attention to is my breath. And can I bring my focus there? Like, it might be cliche, like the simplest thing is your breath, and it's always there. It's always there for you. So if you can be in that, 80 to 100 efforts and grind mode, can you be there and then go, oh, wait, where's my breath? Am I short? Am I tense? Am I kind of like that block of granite again? Or am I like, yeah, this is actually going well? Can I check in with myself as I go? So yeah, do it for a week. I agree with that 100%. Can you, just lean forward, lean into it, whatever the new task, the challenge is. And at the same time, how aware can you be of your breath as you do it? Because that's going to be that real-time feedback. Yeah, if it's numbers related, can you take 15 breaths super calmly, or is it a struggle to do one breath, when you come back to it? So I'll leave that as my advice. It can be a big task. I recognize that. And at the same time, all of us have it.
Yeah. What you said, Sarah, really hit home in that. I'm not necessarily sure that if this was the intent where you're talking about, what am I hiding? And like, even from ourselves, we're great at that, putting the blinders on and not seeing the things that are impacting us, or that that doesn't really matter, or that doesn't affect me, or, oh yeah, that ache and that pain, oh, that's just part of the process. And looking at it from that perspective of what am I ignoring that would actually serve me better to take a look at, versus whatever the shiny new thing of, oh, do do the 100 DMs a day or whatever the advice is, or take on this new training program, add a mobility, add. Can I actually look at what I have and take inventory, just like you talked about the finances component for all of us, of, do I actually know where I am? Or am I so caught up and so distracted by where I'm not that I don't actually know where I am? It's like feeling lost, feeling stuck. And it's until we look at the map or we break out the compass that we can actually determine if we actually are lost. Yeah,
absolutely. And where we put our focus is where we're going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're trying to create more wealth, then we need to look at where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. This has been a really rad experience. I'm going to open it up to either of you. Any additional nuggets of wisdom or any questions or anything that you two have experienced in this space that would be beneficial for the listeners that you'd like to share?
There's something playing in my head, so I'm just going to go. I'm going to riff off of what Gunnar said real quick, because we have talked about the fitness space and the CrossFit space quite a bit. And what he said was, is come back to your breath. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell like how big of a superpower this is. And I want you to go back, if you're listening to this and you're super into the fitness space, go back and watch the last workout of any CrossFit Games documentary. Just go back and watch the last workout. And it doesn't matter if they're coming from last or if they're taking a victory lap. When you find your breath, you know where everything is. It's the wildest and coolest experience. And this has been one of my like unknown superpowers for the longest time, is being able to, in any workout, know where my breath is. Because if I know where my breath is, I know where I am and I know where they are. And it's such a competitive, like I'm a competitive person through and through. Like it's just fun for me. It's like a game. But when you can find that breath in anything you're doing, let's say you're in a meeting and you're in a negotiation and you're the one that knows where their breath is, you're going to succeed in that negotiation, because the other person has already lost track of it. They're probably short breathing. And then if you notice, when you short breathe, the thoughts are just like a hamster in a wheel, right? Finding that breath in any situation, and I'm so glad Gunnar brought this up, is your superpower. Go for a run and find your breath. Jeremy or Gunnar, you probably know who said this, but if you can breathe in a position, you own the position.
It's a Poliquin.
Right. So is that Poliquin?
I believe so.
Yeah. So if you're holding the top of a pull-up, let's just say static hold, top of the pull-up, 20 seconds. The person who can breathe in that position owns that position, and they can be there for days, right? The person who's like, and whether that's lack of fitness, make it so it's an achievable thing to stay there for 20 seconds. When you hold your breath, it is terrible. When you learn to breathe in that position, you finally own that position. Mm-hmm. Bottom of the squat, top of the pull-up, whatever it is. That also applies to take that out of the gym and put that in your life. When you can breathe during a challenging conversation with your spouse, you own self-regulation, right? When you can breathe in a board meeting, when you can breathe right before you go on stage to nail your public speaking, find that breath. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was beautifully put, Gunnar. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and that's something that's part of the trends towards in this space as well, of like the things I see more and more of is, it started off as like a niche thing, and now it's become so prevalent that you see all the products coming out, which is ice baths. Mm-hmm. And it's like, is the ice bath really about getting in the cold? Or is it about the breath? Is it about being able to, Gunnar, you and I had a conversation about this, and I don't know if you want to share that story of the ice baths after the run or the workout that you did with a fellow person in the healthcare industry, of being able to regulate that breath really well.
Oh yeah. I actually just saw this friend, on Saturday morning, super successful PT. Like he just opened a flagship locations, got all this stuff going on. Great person. carries a lot of fear, and it's the story, right? We're running. We did this like group workout. We run to downtown Nashville to go take ice baths, and he's from the South. He's never done cold in his life, which I'm very fortunate. Like I would rather be on ice than water any day of my life. Um, and so like I've spent hours and hours and hours in cold immersion, ice tubs, whatever you want to call it. And I asked him like, hey, like how do you feel about going into this situation as we're light jog down to this place? And he immediately, we're jogging, lost his breath thinking about it. He's like, I don't know, I don't do cold, I'm not sure how it's going to go. Like all of this fear and premature suffering. Like a client of mine reflected this to me one time. We were discussing like his own fears, and are we living in the wreckage of the future? And for my friend that I was running with and going to, he was already like, this is going to be a disaster. I'm not going to make it 20 seconds. I'm just going to jump out and it's going to be embarrassing because there's people there and all this, right? This is all happening because some cold water. And I recognized that in him. And I was like, hey, I'll go. There's two of them. I'll go in right next to you. You can just look at me when we're in there and we'll be fine. And so we, made the plan. We both full submersion pop up. He's panic breath for 30 seconds. And I was like, Ben, I just drop his name, Ben. And as soon as he caught on that, oh, it can be a different way, just by checking with his breath, he made it 3 minutes. And he's like, oh, that was great. I'm going to get one for our location. And it's as simple as that. Yeah. Can you check yourself? And the breath is that space to recognize, is there a story going on that is out of control, running rampant, or is that my opportunity to go, I'm good. I don't need that story. It'll be an experience, whatever you want to implement into that space. Yeah. So thank you for reading that. I'll end it there. That's how it went.
Yeah. Yeah. The breath being such an important part of it. It's the one thing that you're going to do from birth till death consistently. Or not, maybe not consistently, but you'll always be doing it. Yeah. Any other final thoughts, Gunnar, or any other nuggets of wisdoms before we start to wrap things up?
Yeah. And just acknowledging, to find your breath can be a few steps. Like if you're not used to it, that's fine. One way, or I'll give you a platter of options. One way to get to your breath is to have a cue. So for instance, it will go back to the gym example. If you struggle with double unders, or you dislike an echo bike, or rope climbs freak you out, CrossFit gyms have these amazing visual cues that you can look at, usually about 10 feet up on the wall for wall balls. A lot of them look like targets. What I encourage pretty much every client that I work with is to, when that moment happens, and we can visualize it beforehand, when that moment happens where you trip on the double under, or your grip starts to go and you're like, I don't know if I can get back up on this rope, or whatever other movement, like the echo bike, you just did an interval, you hate this place, that's a story. And then look up on the wall, look at the target and focus intently on it and breathe. Use that visual cue to go, oh, right, I'm fine. Come back to yourself, breathe. If you're not in a gym, you could have a bracelet on and you could just, tap the bracelet, or, put your fingers in it, something like that. It's like, have that tactile cue. And then the other ones being like, I have clients who have gotten tattoos. Like, they want this all the time. They know that they're strong, they're capable because they can breathe when they look at that reminder. So if whatever you're in, maybe it's a business meeting, pick something beforehand that you know you can look at, feel, engage with to come back to your breath.
Very cool. Yeah. Awesome. This was such a great conversation. And I'm so thankful for both of you being here. Let's wrap it up with Sara. What do you have to promote? What are you bringing into the world that you want everybody to be aware of?
I just launched You'reDoingGreat.co. And so I'm working with people in the fitness industry one-on-one to work on their stories, connect with their inner kid to find their confidence. And that's where I'm at in this space.
How can they find more about what you're doing?
Instagram is the best way to find me, and it's you'redoinggreat.co. That's where I am. You can go to my personal, which is SK Mozingo, Mozingo, and that's where I live.
Awesome. Gunnar, how about you? What are you bringing into the world? What would you like to have the people aware of?
Thank you for the opportunity, Jeremy. I'm on Instagram. It's my first and last name, no breaks between the words. I do year-long individual coaching, and then every 4 months I have a group course. So if you're interested in learning how to implement all this mindset and mindfulness training and get out of this hustle culture to find your breath and live calm and confident, that's where you can find me. Yeah, I'm here to serve people who are already driven and want to find that space to really know themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you again both for being here. We'll have all the information on how you can connect with Sara and Gunnar in the show notes below. And so thank you both again for being here. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, I'm your host, Jeremy Grunsteiner. And as always, stay strong and most importantly, stay weird.